Hi, welcome to this week's Single Sales Principle webinar, where we're taking a look at the ISMM Level 5 Diploma in Sales and Marketing. In particular, understanding the integrated functions of sales and marketing, Unit 502. Today I want to talk about two models, the Boston Consulting Group Matrix and the product lifecycle. Both of these models are useful when analysing marketing, communication and product portfolios. The model was created, the Boston Consulting Matrix model was created by the Boston Consulting Group, in particular Bruce Henderson, in 1970 to help companies and corporations analyse their business units, i.e. their product lines. Its purpose was to help companies to allocate resources when analysing the brand marketing, product management, strategic management and portfolio analysis. There are two axes very much that operate with the BCG model. First of all, market share, and secondly, market growth. And that gives us the typical four types of products. So if we have a high market share in a fast growing industry, that would very much be called the star. High market growth, but having a low market share, that would be a question mark. Maybe a product that's just been started. Low market share in a mature, slow growing industry, that's what they call dogs. And a product that has high market share in a slow growing industry, i.e. quite a mature industry, that's what they called a cash cow. So let's take a look at each of those in a little bit more detail. So starting with the cash cow. This is where a company has high market share in a slow growing industry. These products or units typically generate profit in excess of the amount of cash that they need to maintain the business. Now, they may come across as a bit boring, they're not particularly sexy products, the industry is quite mature, but companies like them because of their cash generating abilities. And like a cash cow, like a normal cow, they can be milked continuously, whereby the company can take out as much cash as possible. But as the industry itself has low growth, they don't want to put much of that cash back into the product. So little investment is made, because obviously investment in this sort of product could potentially be wasted. The danger, of course, is that if you're milking the cash cow to fund other projects such as your stars, you could potentially leave that cash cow quite weak. And their leading position in that market could, of course, be under threat the more you kind of keep taking and not giving. So that's something that you need to be aware with a cash cow. You can't milk too much if the leading position is under threat. So let's move on to the second one, which is our dogs. So dogs are products with low market share in a mature, slow growing industry. So not a great scenario. The industry isn't particularly moving forward and your product has a low market share in that industry. But typically these products are breaking even. So whilst it may, be quite a good business in terms of its providing jobs, from an accounting point of view, these product lines are seen as worthless because it's not generating cash for the company. And they typically depress a profitable company's return on the assets ratio, which is how many investors, of course, judge how well a company is being managed. Therefore, a lot of the analysts would suggest that you sell off the dogs because it's harming the investment potential of that business, which sometimes can be seen as a bit tough because it's a business that does wipe its face, it's employing a lot of people and people are still buying it, but of course from an investment perspective it's not particularly attractive. Let's move on to our next one. These are the question marks. Now question marks are where they are operating in high market growth but have a low market share. So typically it's a starting point for most product lines or most businesses, because the business owners have recognised this is a sector that they want a piece of. But of course, you've got to start somewhere. So they have the potential to gain the market share and become stars. And eventually, as the market growth slows, they could even become cash cows. If question marks do not succeed, however, in gaining a market-leading position, they do degenerate quickly into dogs as the market starts to decline. And that's why question marks are often called a bit of a problem child, because question marks need to be analysed carefully in order to determine whether or not they're worth the investment required to grow that market share. So it's an opportunity without a doubt, but how much investment do you keep going? And you need to keep an eye on that marketplace, because if the marketplace starts to slow and you haven't created a niche or a leading position, then you are vulnerable. And lastly, our stars. Stars are the product lines with a high market share in a fast growing industry. The hope is that stars become the next cash cows. Stars require high funding to fight competition, because of course everybody wants a piece of this action. And when industry growth starts to slow, they become cash cows if they keep that leading position, or else they start to become dogs if they start to decline market share. So here's my question to you. Where does your product line sit in terms of the BCJ matrix? And once you've done that, you need to think, okay, what's the benefit of us having this position? But also, what are the dangers? Are we vulnerable? What are the disadvantages? So that's the BCG matrix. Another way of looking at this whole area is by taking a look at product life cycles. And it fits in quite well with the Boston Consulting matrix as well. So the product life cycle model describes how products go through 4 phases after they are launched. And I guess the easiest way to think of it is we as people, the way that we grow from birth through to death. You know, we go through basic infancy, through childhood, through adulthood, into old age. And just as we go from as babies being quite needy, and then sort of becoming more independent, and then as we become adults, we start to provide very much for the family that is around us, until towards the end of our lives, we become needy again, and we're starting to pull on the others to help us out. Exactly the same way as that applies to us, applies to product lines. So let's take a look at the 4 phases. So the first one is the introduction or startup, where a new product is launched to a market. Second is growth. Third is maturity. And fourth is decline. Now, while the model does not predict sales, it does, of course, provide a useful guide in terms of marketing tactics and how much effort and resource and money should be put behind marketing efforts at certain parts of the life product cycle. So, again, let's take a look at the 4 areas. During the introduction or startup phase, there will most likely be heavy promotional advertising activity designed to raise awareness of the new product. If it's a high-tech type product, it will probably have a premium price so that the development cost, which would have been quite major early on, can be recouped very, very quickly. Alternatively, it may be priced quite low because the marketing strategy would be get high penetration as quickly as possible. So, for example, a lot of media companies, the satellite companies, etc., gave away products free just so that we would take them on, get high penetration, widespread, so that we would then come as customers, sign up to the subscriptions, and they start to get the money back that way. Secondly, during the growth phase, promotional activities will tend to focus either on expanding the market by putting the same product into different segments. That may be for demographics, it may be sort of geographical, or it may be expanding the product range that they already have. So this is absolutely key in terms of where we now take this product. It's now starting to become established. Are there new markets that we can take it to? Or can we expand the range? Can we have a premium range? Can we actually serve one with bells and whistles, etc., etc.? Then thirdly, the maturity phase. By the time a product reaches maturity, the company needs to reap considerable benefits from the time and money that it's spent so far. So this is where the product's features may continue to be tweaked and updated. There may still be some promotion to differentiate the product from its competition. However, the marketing activity and expenditure levels will be much, much lower than the first two areas of the product life cycle. And then finally, once the product begins to decline, marketing support may be withdrawn absolutely, and sales will entirely be the result of the reputation amongst the market sector. So for example, it may be a product it's been around for years. There's absolutely no marketing or advertising effort that goes into it, but the older population still go into the supermarket and still buy that product. By this stage, of course, the most important decision that needs to be made is whether or not you should carry on with the product or actually take it off the market altogether. It can, of course, be quite tempting for businesses to just leave the product on the shelf, particularly if it has a loyal small band of followers. The problem is, of course, while managers in the company are busy getting that product out, what else could they be doing? Do we lose our focus? There are some businesses that have basically had cash cows that have then started to fall into dogs, but because there's still a market, they've held on desperately because maybe it's still paying some of the wages. But of course, while we were investing our time into that, we weren't investing in a potential new market. So, as I've just started to sort of to kind of alert you there, is that very much we can start to link the product life cycle with the Boston Consultant Matrix, because quite clearly it goes through very much that curve. So question marks, of course, will fall into the startup and growth stages. Stars tend to be at the maturity stage, and the cash cows are in the decline stage along with the dogs. Now, the fact that both cash cows and dogs are in the actual decline stage, of course, indicates a major problem with the life cycle model. Because if a marketing department decides that a product is approaching the decline phase, it may decide to pull marketing. In doing so, of course, the product's sales will decline because people aren't aware of them as much. Now, if they were a cash cow, potentially that's now going to damage the position. And if we'd have handled it much better at the maturity stage, perhaps we could have extended the life of that product. So, thank you for listening. I hope that's given you a small introduction to the BCG matrix and the product life cycle, and gives you some understanding as to where your product lines may fit. So thank you very much for watching, and tune in next time when we discuss another of the units within the ISMM Level 5 Diploma.